Hello everyone, welcome to our series JavaScript interview questions, and today we are going to be talking about currying in JavaScript. So currying in JavaScript is one of the most important questions which are being asked in JavaScript interviews. So let's see how it goes. So what happens is the interviewer asks you a question, a simple question like implement a function and make it so that it can be called like this. We got 4 and we got 5 here, and when we call the sum function like this, it should return 9. So that is the ask usually. So now this is the ask, but before we go on and implement this, we'll just create a simple sum function for fun. Maybe I'll just write sum here, and I'll expect 2 argument out of it, and I'll return a plus b. So this is the most basic function one can create in any programming language. So we have also done that. This is the sum method, but how do we call it? The usual way. We pass 2 argument 4 comma 5, and when we run it, it's going to return 9, and that is pretty obvious. Now to implement it in this way, what we have to do is we have to break it up in our mind. So what we see is that there is a sum function. It takes 1 argument, and then it returns another function, because that's why we are able to call it with this second argument, that is 5. So there is a function, I'll repeat again, which takes 1 argument. When we call it, it returns another function which takes second argument, and when we call it, it returns the resultant value. So how do we implement it? Okay, so before going on to implement it, I'll talk quickly about closure in JavaScript. So closure in JavaScript is also among one of the most important topics for JavaScript interviews. But usually people don't just go in and ask what is closure. They might, like, even I have in certain interviews, but usually they ask applications of closure. Like, they will give one example and they'll ask you to implement it. So this currying is one of the application of closure. There could be another applications like factory functions and like so on, but today we are talking about currying. So before going into currying, we need to understand what is closure. So just to put it in very simple language, a closure is a function that remembers its outer variables. And like, wherever we are calling that function, maybe we are returning that function from inside of another function, and we are calling it outside somewhere, but it still remembers the variable which were in the enclosing functions. I'll just like put it on the code here. So suppose there is this unnamed function. It has a variable a that's, well, its value is chord or something, and then there is a it when we call it, it returns another function, and that this resultant function, it console.logs this a. Okay. Okay, so let's just name it something. Okay, so now what we do is we do like variable foo equals to something. So now if we do this, then we know that inside foo we have this function which is being written from inside something. And now if we call this foo, we are just we can say that we are calling this particular function which does console.log a, and where is the value of a? It's inside something. So even though we are calling this function from outside of something, we can still access this value, a code. So if I do foo, when I run this script, it will return me code. Moving on. So For some people this could be pretty obvious, like I might not have had to do this much of work to explain this to you, but for beginners who are new to JavaScript this could be little challenging to understand, I guess, or not, but I had to talk about it, so I did. Now coming on to our original problem, that we have to implement sum in such a way that we can pass each argument as a another function invocation and pass that argument to each individual invocation. So what we are going to do, we'll create this function. I'll name it sum and I'll name this function as sum alt. Okay. Now what does it take? It takes one argument, and what does it do? It returns a function. How do you know that it returns a function? Because when you call this sum function, whatever is being returned is also callable. That's why we are able to pass this value 5 to it. So it returns a function, so I'll create another function here, and I'll it will take another argument, as we are passing an argument 5 here, and it will return a plus b. Okay, so now if we have done so much work, it's only fair to go on and just run this script. So I'll console.log, and what will I console log? So it's a equals to sum 4 and 9. I guess that should be 13 if I do this, and I'll just 13 it is. Nice. So now once the interviewer asks this question and we go on and implement it this way, the another obvious question that comes almost every time is, what if there were 3 arguments? Like we had something like this, then the result should have been obviously 10, but this implementation will not work. We could safely say that from inside the second function, instead of returning a plus b, we will return another function, and from that function, inside that function we will return a plus b plus c. We could say that, but again the interviewer will ask, what if there are n number of arguments? So this is where it gets tricky, because now you have to write a function which returns another function indefinitely, or maybe n times. Yeah, n times. Okay, so now how do we do that? That's a good question. So now how do we do that? Let's go. So again, coming on to our original topic of the day, that is currying. So now I think that is high time to talk about what is currying. So currying in JavaScript is basically transforming a function, not calling it, transforming a function in such a way that it its argument can be passed as individual arguments to different function calls. I think that should be the definition. I just made it up. I didn't. I think I'll add some information, or maybe documents in the references documents in the description, so that you can see a formal definition. But this is pretty much it. So now we have the definition of currying. We have the problem at our hands. How do we do this? So what we have to do is, we'll do it at the top. What are we doing? We are doing n level currying or whatever. Now now to do this, I'm going to create a method curry, and what will it do? It will take a function as an argument, and it will transform that function in such a way. So what will it return? It will return a transformed function that it expects each of its argument like this. this. Okay, so which function we have to transform? We had this old school sum old function. Now I'll go in and remove these. I'll just name it back as sum, obviously. Now let's make it more fun. A, B, C, and D. Okay, so now there is this sum function. It takes 4 arguments and it returns the sum of all the 4 arguments. Now, how do we make this function so that we can call it like this? Sum 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we call it tsum, basically that is transform sum. Now we have to do something like tsum equals to something something. For now nothing. Okay, so so now here we have to create that curry method, which we'll use like this curry, and we'll pass sum to it, and it will, this, just writing it like that will transform that sum function, and inside tsum we'll get a function that can be called like this. Okay, now we have to create this curry function in such a way that it takes this sum as an argument. Sum is a function which we want to transform, and it returns the transformed function, and that transform function is callable like this, so we can call it like this, or I think it should be callable in both ways. We could do this, or we could do this, or we should be able to do this. You know where I'm going with this. You can just create some different number of permutations and combinations here, but you could call it in any of these ways. Okay, but we are going to stick with this because this was the original ask in our interview questions, if we haven't forgotten about that so far. Okay, so now let's go and create this function. We are going to call it curry for obvious reasons. So what do we know about curry? We know that it takes a function as an argument, so we will just go and put a function here. What else? We know that it returns another function that is the transformed version of the function that is being passed to us. Okay, so we'll go on and return a function here like this. And now what do we know about this function? This is a transform function, remember. We know that we can call it multiple times, or in another word, this function, it either returns a value when we call it, or it returns another function that can be called with another argument or another set of arguments. Okay, so with that assumption in mind, we know that it's going to take some arguments. We don't know how many. It could be one, it could be multiple, but there are some arguments. So we'll just do this here, that it will take some arguments, and now we are inside this function. Now what do we see here? Like, we are doing n level currying, so this function should either return a function or it should either return a value, and if it is returning a function, it returns it n times, and n is basically the number of arguments that this fn function takes. So if it is going to be run n times, we know that some recursion is going to be used, and if recursion is going to be used, we know that there is going to be some breaking condition of that recursion function. So first we'll just write that condition, and what could be that breaking condition of the recursion function? And the breaking condition is when the arguments that are passed to our function or that are being received by this transform function are or has reached the maximum number of arguments allowed. So basically we could say if the args dot length is greater than fn dot length. Okay, now we have this function at place, and we have this if condition. This is basically the breaking condition of our recursion. And when will this condition happen? Basically when this is one of the case when we are calling and passing all the arguments at once. For now just remember this. So this is basically when we have all the arguments. So in this args we must have all the arguments. And when do we know we have all the arguments? When the number of arguments being passed to the function is greater than or equal to the number of arguments that our original function expects. Okay, now what should we do if we have all the arguments? If we have all the arguments, then we'll just return. And what will you return? The resultant of our function. And where do we have our function? In fn. And what do we pass to it? All the args that we have. Okay, so there's that. Now in the else condition, like if we are not at the breaking condition, if we don't have all the arguments with us, or if we are just calling it for the first time, calling what? The transform function this. So if you are calling it for the first time, this tsum, and we have only passed one argument. Okay, so now what should it return? As you know, it returns another function that is invocable or callable with another argument or another set of arguments. So what will it return? It will return the transformed method. And where is the transformed method? This is the transformed method, this particular, because it is being written by the curry function, and the curry function returns the transformed method or function. So both are the same thing in JavaScript. Okay, so kind of same, but we are not talking about that now. Let's name it something. Curried. It could be anything, but I'm just, because this is the curried transform method, so I'm naming it curried. What will it return? It will return another method which when called returns the transformed method. Basically this is here, this sum tsum, when we pass one argument to it, it will return another method that is also the transform method. But when that another method is being called, that again returns the transform method. So what we'll do, we'll just return a function here, and the function, in that function we expect another set of argument. Okay, that is next args. And what do we return from here? We return the transform method. And where is the transform method? The method that is being written by curry. This is the transform method, because we know, as we have already established, that curry returns a transform method. So we'll return curried, and we'll pass all the earlier arguments like this, and we'll just concatenate the new arguments to it. Okay, so now what's happening here is, like every time this method is being called recursively, we are adding this 1 2 3 these arguments to this args array, to the curried, and it gets those here into that args, and it keeps on running until and unless we have, basically in this case, 4 arguments, or it could have been n if we had any more arguments here. But as we don't, so we just will talk about it being running 4 times. So now I think we should be done, and I'll just move it a little back. And so this is our curry method in place. This was our original method sum. Now we are doing curry sum. So basically this curry sum is transforming this sum method and passing it to tsum. We are calling tsum like this. I'll just comment it out here. And okay, let's remove this extra space. Okay, now if I run this program, I expect it to return 10. Let's see. It returns 10. Nice. So now let's check some different what do we call them, some different combinations here. I am passing the second argument here, and now I just have three invocations. I run it, I get 10. I pass the third argument here, and the fourth one like this. I run it. What do I get? 10. And I used it the old-fashioned way, and it should still be callable. It should still have its own implementation. That is 10. So now I think that was it about currying. I hope if someone asks you a question in an interview that what is currying, what is closure, how do you implement currying, or if they give you this famous sum question, uh, or if they give you this infamous sum question, I think you must be able to implement it. Just go through it. I hope it is obvious to you, the implementation or the explanation. If it is not, just go through it multiple times, maybe try it a bit and try by yourself. You will be able to get it. Hope you like the video. If yes, please do subscribe. You might be our first subscriber. Then congratulations to both of us. If not, still please do subscribe. If you like the video, press the like button as well, because that will do nothing for us because we are a new channel, but still